In 2021, condos in Toronto were selling for way over the asking price within 48 hours sometimes, and people were buying them without even seeing the units in some cases. Today, those same units are sitting on the markets for 90, 120, 150 days. In today's episode, we're going to explore the whole story of how this happened and if it was inevitable from the start. My name is Jordan, and thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the podcast. So first, let's talk about how this boom was built. I've been a realtor in Toronto for 9 years now, and I've lived in the city my whole life. I can tell you from my firsthand experience, I had pre-construction sales reps telling me that there were people coming in, a lot of times foreign buyers, who were actually buying entire floors of new units at a time, which is pretty wild. So what this led to was the developers thinking that they could essentially get away with anything. They were building smaller and smaller units, trying to fit as many units as they could into each project, coming up with some really wacky and unlivable floor plans for these units. I've personally seen units that are 250 square feet, 300 square feet, some units that are literally just a hallway and then a lined kitchen. Somehow you're supposed to fit a bed in there and a table and a couch. So that trend continued. Developers kept pricing the units as aggressively as they could. We saw some price per square foot numbers getting out of hand, reaching $1,700, $1,800 a square foot. So there's just a big disconnect between developers trying to build units for livability and for families. They just ended up building these units that were purely for profit. And I can tell you, I've walked through hundreds of these units now. I've seen almost every building in the city at this point, except for some of the brand new ones. Some of the units are pretty bad. The layouts are really not functional. There's these sliding glass doors that if you've rented in the city or if you've gone around to some new condos recently, you'll know that these are kind of all over the place. They don't give you proper soundproofing. They're just a sliding glass door and they call it a bedroom. To me, I think a bedroom should have at least a window in it. Clearly, developers disagreed with that. I recently went to a 250 square foot unit that only had 2 stovetop burners on it, no actual oven, just like a tiny pull-out drawer for a dishwasher. So what this also led to was almost every single inch of downtown being taken up with new construction projects. I remember specifically maybe in the last decade, last 15 years, it was nuts. There was cranes everywhere. Every usable lot was being used and taken down to build a new condo. And now we have a skyline full of condos. So if investor sentiment and buyer demand was there and it was absorbing this mass amount of inventory, what started breaking the market? What we had was during COVID, lending rates went to historic lows. The Bank of Canada overnight rate went all the way down to 0.25%, which is really crazy. We've never really seen something like that before. And during COVID, as I'm sure everyone remembers, there was a mass exodus of the city. So personally, I was in a condo unit during COVID with my now wife, and we didn't have a balcony. So we were just sharing this 1 bedroom unit. And like everyone else, we were going on walks every day to try and stay sane. It really is not very sustainable to live in a 1 bedroom unit without a balcony through something like COVID. And so the work from home aspect became more normalized. People kind of thought that would be the new normal for a while to come. And we saw, yeah, the mass exodus, people moving to Barrie, to Grimsby, to Newmarket, even some people moving to cottages full time in Parry Sound or Huntsville or Muskoka, shone a light on what had been quietly going on for years and people realizing how bad some of these tiny condos really were. Even the people living in them I think a lot of those people living right downtown had a routine that was something like going to work, going out for drinks, hanging out with friends, coming home, sleeping, and doing it all over again. So those smaller units didn't seem as bad. They were more like a prime location to sleep in. But once COVID hit, those people realized, geez, I gotta live in this unit full time. I can't just go out for 99% of the time and just sleep here because you're literally locked down. And it made a lot of people realize how bad some of these condos really were that they were living in. Areas within an hour or 2 hours outside of the city were really booming like crazy. And then what really broke the market, what really started this precipitous downfall of the Toronto market, especially the condo market, was the rate hikes. The rates went from 0.25%, the bank's key rate, to 5% in 16 months. So you just think about that. It's ridiculous. Just, in my opinion, a real lack of foresight. It signaled a real panic from the Bank of Canada's end. But this was a big overreaction, in my opinion. And people that were on variable rates or even had a lot of borrowing costs, they just got destroyed by these rate increases. And it made investors' lives really tough with renting out condos, for example, because now your mortgage is not even close to covered by the rent that you're getting if you're on a variable mortgage. There were tons of people that thought, oh, let's get this 0.99% variable rate, myself included. And then all of a sudden, the bank says, that's not going to last for very long, goes from 0.25% to 5% in 16 months. The rate shock was insane. It was very real. Tons of Canadians felt it, had to give up their homes, give up their investment properties. Pretty rough. And it really did affect that investor segment, maybe the hardest of all. Those one bedroom and bachelor units they were renting out before, first of all, were starting to get ditched because COVID made people realize, hey, these units aren't that great. And then the second part is your actual monthly costs went up by so much because of the rate shock. So now you can't really rent it out anywhere near a profit. You're just trying to tread water and not hemorrhage money every month. So today, the market's obviously flooded with units. New condo sales fell 60% in 2025. There are only 1,600 new units sold. It's a decrease of 95% from 2021. Just think about that for a second. 95% decrease from 2021. It's the lowest number of new units sold since 1991. So we're talking about over a 30-year period. We are living through a historic period right now in the Toronto market, especially in the Toronto condo market. Another interesting thing is the Bank of Canada just released an article on this, and I'd recommend you check it out. But one of the things they mentioned is that 60% of the new units coming out are still these micro units. And only 30% of reported buyers want those types of units. So even though there's been this huge reckoning with the pricing, those tiny units are still being built. So not all the developers have learned the lesson that is pretty clearly right in front of them, that people don't want these units anymore. In 2025 alone, 28 condo projects were canceled. That's 7,000 units or more that are simply never going to get built when we still do have a housing shortage problem in the city. An interesting paradox, though, that's going on is right now there's too much supply and obviously not enough demand to keep up with that supply. However, it is possible that just within 2 or 3 years from now, the exact opposite could be the case. We're actually not building enough units reportedly to keep up with future supply. So, where we are today is a really interesting market. In my opinion, it's of course very buyer favored. And one thing I will say is if you are looking to get a condo in this market, or even a house for that matter, just think about the buyers over the last decade or 15 years who would kill to be in your shoes right now. You have a lot of negotiating power. You can take your time. There was a time when you wanted to buy a house in Toronto where you had to go to an offer presentation. You'd probably be bidding against at least 5 other people, if not more. I've been to ones with 35, even 40 offers before. The other thing to consider is, of course, market sentiment is down right now. But just like in 2022, leading up to 2022, before COVID, it seemed like the market would never go down and it was just up and up and up. Well, obviously, that was not sustainable. But in the same way, the market just going down and down and down is also not sustainable and is not going to happen forever. So when we look back historically at good times to buy, generally, when the market is lower and market sentiment is down, it's a good time to buy. So usually consumer confidence and the best times to buy are at odds with each other if we look historically. So if you're looking at a condo today, there's a couple things to consider. I think people who are first-time buyers using it as a way to get into the market. I mean, right now there's condos in the $300,000 range in the city, which is really wild. It's obviously still not cheap, when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's a lot more affordable than it has been in the past. Using a condo as kind of a stepping stone to get into the market and participate in future gains is a good strategy. Another thing to consider is that now the Bank of Canada's key rate's at about 2.25%. So we have come down quite a bit from that 5% high mark. So historically, we are still in a pretty good spot. And it is a pretty decent time, in my opinion, to pull the trigger on a new condo or a new house. And I'm confident in saying if you look back 3 to 5 years from now, you're going to realize you made a pretty good buying decision. So what I would say to you today, if you're looking to buy, is obviously the first thing, make sure the timing is right for you. More important than anything else is that the timing makes sense for you personally, for your family. If you do think it's a good time to buy for you, I'm here to help. I've lived in Toronto my whole life. I've been a realtor in the city for over 9 years now. So you can reach me at 416-908-6124, or there'll be links in the description below to book a quick call if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching, and if you like the video, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content like this in the future.